Welcome to today's English learning session, where we'll explore one of the most famous stories ever written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Hound of the Baskervilles. This story is a thrilling tale of mystery, danger, and the legendary detective Sherlock Holmes. As we journey through this story, you'll not only enjoy a classic tale, but also improve your English listening and comprehension skills. Dr. John Watson, Sherlock Holmes's trusted friend and companion, begins our story. He recalls a cold, foggy morning in London when the two of them sat in Holmes's study at 221B Baker Street. As usual, Holmes was busy examining a peculiar object, an old walking stick left behind by a visitor earlier that morning. "Watson, what do you make of this?" Holmes asked, handing the stick to his friend. Watson, eager to impress Holmes, carefully studied the stick. It was made of heavy wood with a silver band near the top. Engraved on the silver were the letters CCH and the words "To James Mortimer, M.R.C.S., from his friends of the CCH, 1884. "It seems to belong to a doctor, likely a country practitioner," Watson said. "Perhaps the CCH stands for a local hunting club or hospital." Holmes smiled, as he often did when Watson made a deduction. "An excellent guess, my dear Watson. Now, let us see who our visitor is." Just then, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. It was Mrs. Hudson, their landlady, announcing the arrival of Dr. James Mortimer. Dr. Mortimer was a tall, thin man with a long nose and deep-set eyes. He entered nervously, holding a yellowed manuscript. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he began. "I have come to seek your advice on a matter that has troubled me greatly. It concerns the death of my friend, Sir Charles Baskerville, and the legend of the Baskerville family." Dr. Mortimer explained that Sir Charles Baskerville had recently died under mysterious circumstances at his estate in Devonshire, known as Baskerville Hall. The Baskerville family, he said, was cursed by a legend dating back many generations. According to the legend, a gigantic supernatural hound haunted the family, bringing death to any Baskerville who ventured out on the moor at night. Holmes listened intently as Dr. Mortimer read the manuscript aloud. The story detailed how Sir Hugo Baskerville, a cruel and wicked ancestor, had once kidnapped a young woman. She escaped and fled across the moor, but Sir Hugo, in his rage, pursued her. When his men found them, they discovered both the girl, dead from exhaustion, and Sir Hugo, killed by a monstrous hound with blazing eyes. "Ever since that dreadful night," Dr. Mortimer continued, "the hound has been said to haunt the Baskerville family. Sir Charles was deeply disturbed by this legend. He believed the hound was real and feared for his life." Watson glanced at Holmes, expecting him to dismiss the story as mere superstition. But Holmes remained silent, his sharp mind already working through the facts. "Dr. Mortimer," Holmes said finally, "you mentioned that Sir Charles died under mysterious circumstances. What exactly happened?" Dr. Mortimer described how Sir Charles had been found dead near the gates of Baskerville Hall. His face was twisted in terror, and there were strange marks around him on the ground, as if made by a giant hound. "No signs of violence, yet the expression on his face was one of utter horror," Dr. Mortimer said. "And those footprints, I have never seen anything like them." Holmes considered this carefully. "What do you want me to do?" "Sir Charles's heir, Sir Henry Baskerville, is arriving in London from Canada. I fear for his safety. I need your help to protect him and to uncover the truth behind these strange events." Holmes agreed to take the case, intrigued by the challenge it presented. He asked Dr. Mortimer to return the next day with Sir Henry so they could meet and discuss the situation further. As Dr. Mortimer left, Watson turned to Holmes. "Surely you don't believe in this supernatural hound?" "Of course not, Watson," Holmes replied. "But there is something here that warrants investigation. It may not be a hound from hell, but it is certainly something, or someone, very real." The next morning, Dr. Mortimer arrived at Baker Street with Sir Henry Baskerville, a sturdy, confident man in his early 30s. Despite his calm demeanour, it was clear that the news of his uncle's death and the family legend had unsettled him. "Mr. Holmes," Sir Henry began, "I've just arrived in London and already strange things are happening. This morning, I received an anonymous note warning me to stay away from the moor. It was composed of words cut out from a newspaper." Holmes examined the note carefully. "A warning indeed. Someone clearly doesn't want you to return to Baskerville Hall. This suggests that your life may be in danger." "But who would want to harm me?" Sir Henry asked. "That is what we must find out," Holmes replied. "Tell me, Sir Henry, have you noticed anything else unusual since your arrival?" "Well," Sir Henry said, "my new boot was stolen from my hotel room last night. Only one boot, and it was brand new." Holmes's interest was piqued. "A single boot stolen? Curious, very curious." Sir Henry agreed to follow Holmes's advice and allowed the detective to make arrangements for his safety. Holmes decided that Watson would accompany Sir Henry to Baskerville Hall, while he remained in London to investigate further. Before they departed, Holmes gave Watson specific instructions. "Keep a close eye on Sir Henry, Watson. Observe everything, people, places, and anything out of the ordinary. Report back to me regularly, and, whatever you do, do not let Sir Henry wander alone on the moor." With these words of caution, Watson and Sir Henry set off for Baskerville Hall, accompanied by Dr. Mortimer. The journey to Devonshire was long and uneventful, but Watson couldn't shake the feeling of unease that hung over them. As they approached the moor, the landscape changed dramatically. The rolling hills gave way to desolate stretches of land, dotted with jagged rocks and covered in thick mist. The atmosphere was eerie, as if the land itself harboured secrets best left undisturbed. Finally, they arrived at Baskerville Hall, a grand but gloomy mansion surrounded by ancient trees. The house, built of dark stone, stood in stark contrast to the wild, untamed moor that stretched out behind it. Inside the hall, they were greeted by the housekeepers, Mr. and Mrs. Barrymore. The Barrymores were an older couple, loyal to the Baskerville family, but their nervous demeanour suggested that they, too, were affected by the legend of the Hound. That night, as Watson lay in bed, he heard a strange sound, a low, muffled sobbing coming from somewhere in the house. He listened intently, but the sound soon faded away, leaving him wondering if it had been real or just a product of his imagination. The next morning, Watson asked Mr. Barrymore about the crying, but the butler seemed puzzled and denied hearing anything unusual. Watson couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right, but without evidence, he decided to keep his suspicions to himself. Over the next few days, Watson explored the moor with Sir Henry, always careful to stay close by his side. The moor was a place of stark beauty, but also of danger. The ground was treacherous, with deep bogs hidden beneath the heather, and the mist that rolled in each evening seemed almost alive, as if it were trying to swallow them whole. Despite the ominous atmosphere, Sir Henry was determined to investigate his uncle's death and uncover the truth behind the legend. He was not a man easily frightened, but even he could not ignore the strange events that began to occur. One afternoon, while walking near the edge of the moor, Watson and Sir Henry encountered a man named Mr. Stapleton, a local naturalist. Stapleton was an odd fellow, with a nervous energy and a habit of darting his eyes about, as if constantly on the lookout for something. Stapleton lived nearby with his sister Beryl, who was strikingly beautiful but seemed troubled and anxious. Despite her brother's friendly demeanour, there was something about him that put Watson on edge. As they talked, Stapleton pointed out a particularly dangerous part of the moor known as the Grimpen Mire, a treacherous bog that had claimed the lives of both men and animals. The mire was a labyrinth of soft ground and hidden pools of water, where even the most experienced locals could become trapped and drown. "Stay away from the mire," Stapleton warned. "It's easy to lose your way and find yourself sinking into the bog." Later that evening, Sir Henry received an unexpected invitation to dinner at the Stapletons' home. Watson accompanied him, and though the evening passed without incident, Watson noticed that Beryl seemed particularly distressed. At one point, when her brother was out of earshot, she whispered urgently to Sir Henry, "You must leave this place. The moor is not safe for you." Before Sir Henry could respond, Stapleton returned, and Beryl quickly changed the subject. Watson made a mental note of her warning and resolved to keep a close watch on both Stapletons. The following day, Watson decided to investigate the mysterious crying he had heard on his first night at Baskerville Hall. He discreetly questioned Mrs. Barrymore, but she remained tight-lipped, insisting that there was nothing unusual in the house. Undeterred, Watson continued his search and eventually discovered a small hidden room in the attic, where he found Mrs. Barrymore sitting alone, weeping quietly. She was startled by Watson's arrival, but quickly composed herself. "Doctor, Watson, I didn't mean to disturb anyone," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just my brother Selden. He's an escaped convict. He's hiding out on the moor, and I fear for his life." Watson was shocked by this revelation. Mrs. Barrymore explained that Selden had been convicted of a terrible crime and had escaped from prison only a few weeks before. She and her husband had been secretly helping him by leaving food and clothing for him on the moor, but they were terrified that he might be caught, or worse, killed by the Hound. Watson, moved by Mrs. Barrymore's distress, promised not to tell Sir Henry, but he knew that this information could be crucial to their investigation. He decided to write a detailed report of everything he had learned so far and send it to Holmes in London. Several days later, Watson was surprised to receive a telegram from Holmes, informing him that he would be arriving at Baskerville Hall that very evening. Watson had not expected Holmes to leave London so soon, but he was relieved to have his friend and mentor by his side once more. When Holmes arrived, he was his usual brisk and confident self. He listened carefully as Watson recounted all that had happened since their arrival in Devonshire, including the warning from Beryl Stapleton, the discovery of Selden, and the strange behaviour of the Barrymores. Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "You've done well, Watson. Your observations have provided valuable clues. But there is still much we do not know. The key to solving this mystery lies in understanding the true nature of the Hound and the motives of those involved." That night, Holmes, Watson, and Sir Henry held a private meeting in the study. Holmes shared his theory that the Hound was not a supernatural creature, but a real living animal trained to kill. He suspected that someone was using the legend to frighten the Baskervilles and drive them away from the estate, or perhaps to eliminate them altogether. Holmes also revealed that he had discovered evidence suggesting that Stapleton was not who he claimed to be. Holmes believed that Stapleton was, in fact, a distant relative of the Baskerville family, with a motive to inherit the estate. The next morning, Holmes and Watson set out to investigate further. They visited the local farmers and villagers, gathering information about Stapleton and his sister. They learned that Stapleton had recently come to Devonshire and that he was not well liked by the locals, who found him arrogant and secretive. Holmes also made inquiries about the Grimpen Mire and learned that it was nearly impossible to cross without expert knowledge of its treacherous paths. This information confirmed Holmes's suspicion that Stapleton was using the mire to his advantage, possibly as a hiding place for the Hound. As the investigation progressed, Holmes became more convinced that Stapleton was behind the mysterious events at Baskerville Hall. He devised a plan to catch Stapleton in the act, but it would require careful timing and execution. Holmes instructed Sir Henry to attend a dinner at the Stapletons' house that evening, as planned. However, after dinner, Sir Henry was to walk back to Baskerville Hall alone, across the moor. Holmes and Watson would follow at a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. The night was dark and foggy as Sir Henry left the Stapletons' house. Holmes and Watson trailed him, their footsteps muffled by the thick mist. The moor was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of a dog. As Sir Henry approached a particularly desolate part of the moor, Holmes signalled to Watson to stop. They crouched behind a large rock, watching as Sir Henry continued on his way. Suddenly, a low, growling sound filled the air. Holmes and Watson froze, their hearts pounding. Out of the mist, a huge spectral hound appeared, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The creature bounded towards Sir Henry, snarling and snapping its jaws. Before the hound could reach its target, Holmes sprang into action. He drew his revolver and fired several shots at the beast. The hound yelped and fell to the ground, dead. Watson rushed to Sir Henry, who was shaken but unharmed. Together they examined the hound and discovered that it was indeed a real animal, but it had been coated in a phosphorus substance that made it glow in the dark. As they stood over the hound's lifeless body, Holmes noticed movement in the distance. It was Stapleton, fleeing across the moor towards the Grimpen Mire. "After him!" Holmes shouted, and the three men gave chase. They followed Stapleton to the edge of the mire, but the fog was thick, and the ground was treacherous. Stapleton, desperate and reckless, plunged into the mire, disappearing into the mist. Holmes and Watson could only watch as the ground swallowed him up, and he was lost forever in the deadly bog. With Stapleton's death, the mystery of the hound was finally solved. Holmes and Watson returned to Baskerville Hall, where they explained everything to Sir Henry. Stapleton, it turned out, was indeed a Baskerville, though his connection to the family had been hidden for years. He had plotted to kill Sir Charles and Sir Henry, hoping to inherit the Baskerville estate for himself. The hound was a large, fierce dog that Stapleton had trained to attack on command. He had used the legend of the hound to terrify his victims, coating the dog with phosphorus to make it appear supernatural. Holmes also revealed that Beryl Stapleton was not Stapleton's sister, but his wife. She had been coerced into helping him with his schemes, though she had tried to warn Sir Henry of the danger. With the case closed, Sir Henry thanked Holmes and Watson for saving his life and vowed to restore Baskerville Hall to its former glory. Holmes and Watson returned to London, satisfied that justice had been served. In the end, the story of the Hound of the Baskervilles was not just a tale of mystery and danger, but a testament to the power of reason and the triumph of truth over superstition. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling adventure with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. We hope you enjoyed the story and found it helpful for improving your English skills. If you liked this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more English learning content. Until next time, keep exploring new stories and sharpening your mind with the great detective, Sherlock Holmes. Here are some key words and their meanings that can be learned from the story Sherlock Holmes, the Hound of the Baskervilles. Legend, meaning. A traditional story sometimes regarded as historical but unauthenticated. Example. The legend of the Baskerville family involves a supernatural hound. Supernatural. Meaning. Attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. Example. The supernatural hound was believed to haunt the Baskerville family. Mysterious. Meaning. Difficult or impossible to understand, explain or identify. Example. Sir Charles Baskerville died under mysterious circumstances. Cursed. Meaning, affected by a curse, or a state of being doomed or under a spell. Example. The Baskerville family was believed to be cursed. Terrified. Meaning, extremely scared or frightened. Example. Sir Charles was terrified of the legend of the hound. Heir. Meaning, a person legally entitled to the property or rank of another on that person's death. Example, Sir Henry Baskerville was the heir to Baskerville Hall. Treacherous, meaning, hazardous because of presenting hidden or unpredictable dangers. Example, the Grimpen Mire was a treacherous part of the moor. Bizarre, meaning, very strange or unusual, especially so as to cause interest or amusement. Example, The disappearance of a single boot from Sir Henry's hotel room was bizarre, spectral, meaning ghostly, resembling or characteristic of a spectre. Example: the spectral hound with glowing eyes was terrifying. Revelation, meaning a surprising and previously unknown fact that has been disclosed to others. Example: the revelation that Stapleton was a Baskerville shocked everyone. Treacherous, meaning dangerous or deceptive. Example: the Grimpen Mire was a treacherous bog where many had lost their lives. Phosphorus, meaning a chemical element that glows in the dark. Example: the hound was coated in phosphorus to give it a supernatural appearance. Coerced, meaning to compel someone to do something by using force or threats. Example: Beryl Stapleton was coerced into helping her husband with his schemes. Conceal, meaning to hide something or keep it secret. Example: Stapleton concealed his true identity from everyone. Desolate, meaning a place deserted of people and in a state of bleak and dismal emptiness. Example: the moor was a desolate and eerie place, especially at night. Ominous, meaning giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is going to happen. Example: the ominous fog on the moor added to the sense of danger. Labyrinth, meaning a complicated, irregular network of passages or paths in which it is difficult to find one's way. A maze. Example: the Grimpen Mire was a labyrinth of hidden dangers. Bog, meaning wet, spongy ground, often found in a swamp or marsh. Example: the Grimpen Mire was a dangerous bog that could swallow anyone who stepped into it. Inherit, meaning to receive money, property, or a title as an heir at the death of the previous holder. Example: Stapleton planned to inherit the Baskerville estate by eliminating Sir Henry. Deception, meaning the act of deceiving someone, often by hiding the truth. Example: Stapleton's entire plan was built on deception. Investigation, meaning the action of investigating something or someone, a formal or systematic examination or research. Example: Holmes conducted a thorough investigation to uncover the truth. Spectre, meaning a ghost or phantom. Example: the hound was believed to be a spectre that haunted the Baskervilles. Brisk, meaning quick, energetic, and active. Example: Holmes had a brisk and confident manner when discussing the case. Mire, meaning a stretch of swampy or boggy ground. Example: the Grimpen Mire was one of the most dangerous parts of the moor. Devious, meaning showing a skillful use of underhanded tactics to achieve goals. Example: Stapleton was devious in his schemes to claim the Baskerville fortune. Disguise, meaning to give someone or oneself a different appearance in order to conceal one's identity. Example: Stapleton used a disguise to hide his true intentions. Injustice, meaning lack of fairness or justice. Example: Holmes was determined to prevent the injustice of Sir Henry's death. Companion, meaning a person or animal with whom one spends a lot of time or with whom one travels. Example: Watson was Holmes's loyal companion throughout the investigation. Spectacle, meaning a visually striking performance or display. Example: the glowing hound created a terrifying spectacle on the moor. Legacy, meaning something handed down by a predecessor, often referring to reputation or property. Example: the Baskerville legacy was threatened by the curse of the hound. These words are not only useful for understanding the story, but also valuable for expanding your English vocabulary